So there has to be a way to solve the corruption in Nigeria. And my recommendation is death penalty. Death penalty. Anyone that is involved in the looting of public funds must be tied to the state. Public execution. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Evangelist Isaac Ivbaze.
And this is Oseriemen Ivbaze.
Well, what we're going to be talking about today is corruption in Africa and what must be done to stop it.
Okay, so when you look at what must be done to stop corruption in Africa, it's a very large issue. And it's been going on for a long period of time. I mean, if you look at just Africa in general, Africa is a very rich continent. You know, it's full of a lot of natural resources. This is basically the motherland, you know. And when you look at the actual countries in Africa, when you analyze them, there's a vast majority of the countries in Africa are in poverty. And even more than that, there's even more corruption than the poverty that's in Africa. That's actually causing the poverty. So now when you really analyze this problem, you really have to go back down. Just take it down to the basics. And you have to look at the mind of these politicians that are being elected to office. If you really think about it. Yeah, I know everybody says, you know, I don't really trust politicians. But look specifically at these African politicians. If you take a look at your country, just look around, you know. Just look at what's going on. There's poverty here, poverty there. And yet you're still going to get elected to office. And your primary objective is to steal money and to take money and to only think about yourself. That's the mind that we have to analyze before anything else. Because if that mind isn't changed, nothing is going to change. These people will still continue to be elected again and again. At the end of the day, I'm just speaking, you know, just to the mind of a politician in Africa. It is a very general statement, but I would say personally, my thoughts on this are, look at it this way. You're going to have kids. You're a politician, yes, you're going to have kids. Let's say you get elected. You have all of this money, and your kids are here. You're thinking, okay, I want my kids to have a good life. This is your country, by the way. So you're elected here, you have all of this money. You look around, there's still a lot of poverty. And you think, well, you know what? I still have my money. I guess, you know, my money will take care of my kids. The situation hasn't changed. How do you expect your kids to feel when they're in this environment where their own people are suffering? Yet you in a position of power did nothing to change that. Don't you think that's going to make a difference? Don't you think that's going to affect their psyche? That's only natural for someone to feel some type of way about that. Like, to be honest, this problem is a generational issue. This stuff will literally creep into the minds of the next generation and the generations to come. They think this way. They'll continue to think this way. Because at the end of the day, nothing is being done because the people that are here are solely thinking for themselves. Instead of thinking for a nation and thinking as, okay, you know, I'm elected to office, so it's my position to be, you know, fulfilling my job as a public servant and doing what I can to help my people. I'm not doing any of that except for getting as much money as I can before I leave. My thing about this is this. This has happened for so long that there's really so much that you can say. My explanation here is really just an analysis, to be honest. When it comes to actually fixing the problem, that's an entire beast in and of itself. Because if you really think about it, how likely do you think someone, just a typical African politician, is going to suddenly out of the blue say, you know what, I'm going to get elected to office and not going to steal any money? You know that's not going to happen anytime soon. So when we really come down to it, there's not really much that can be done. The system right now is just completely corrupted. It's messed up. In order for things to change, a new system has to be adopted entirely, or a different way of dealing with it.
Well, thank you very much, my son. That was an intelligent analysis. What we are talking about here today is corruption in Africa and the best way to stop it, or how we must stop it. Well, first we need to acknowledge the fact that Africa is the most corrupt continent. Let me not use the word. African leaders are the most corrupt leaders in the world. We have seen a lot of damages that have been done to the continent of Africa because of corruption. A continent as rich and naturally endowed as Africa, no one would have expected the condition that Africans are living today. But because of corruption, because of these cankerworms and caterpillars that have found themselves at the corridors of power in Africa, you see, the condition of living of Africans have crippled over the years. Now, the question is that how do we attack this problem? How do we solve it? Now, before you address a problem, you must have to first agree that you have a problem. And so I believe that as many people as are there listening to us must agree, especially Africans, must agree with us that there's actually a problem in Africa when it comes to leadership. Now, let me take a country like Nigeria as a case study. Now, the other time I was listening to a kind of an interview that was conducted with Obasanjo. I can't remember the exact name of the journalist. And they were talking about how much money had been stolen from Nigeria in terms of, since decades, And then the guy talked about $300 billion. Obasanjo agreed. He said, yes, that is correct. And Obasanjo proceeded to say that fighting corruption in Nigeria is like a war. You see, that is to say that criminals that call themselves leaders have actually seen themselves as more powerful than the government itself. And this has been the trend of things, from time in Nigeria. And that is why the country has continued to deteriorate, even as we speak right now. Now, when we talk about the rest part of Africa, it's exactly the same. There's no difference. African leaders talk about solving problem of corruption, and they stand on the podium, they address the public, and they tell them, hey, when you vote me into power, I'm going to attack corruption. I will make sure that corruption is contained. But you see, those are just political rhetorics. What we have seen going on in the continent of Africa is a continent that is bedeviled with all kind of vices in terms of bad leadership. You see, a continent that has been ruined, a continent that has been plunged into chaos because of corruption. And so there has to be a way to curb the excesses of corruption in Africa. And how do we do it? It is not just by going about, singing, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that to solve corruption. This has been going on for decades, for decades, and nothing has been done. So it's a time for the Africans to stand on the ground and devise a means to solve this problem of corruption in that part of the world. Now, if you will agree with me, you'll see that Africans have completely lost respect in every part of the world. You go anywhere, you are treated as if you are not human beings because of the way that African leaders have relegated that continent. We are talking about the continent of Africa, and without that continent, the rest part of the world will not survive. And yet, Africans are relegated, are disgraced, and relegated, and disrespected anywhere in the world. This is because the leaders of Africa have proved to the rest of the world that they have no interest of Africa in their heart. And so what they do is they take the money that belongs to their own country and they take it to Europe, where of course they take it to Western country and Asia, and put the money in the bank. So I just cannot understand why nothing has been done all these years. And now it is a time for Africans to be resolute and to find solution to this problem. It is not a matter of making promises. It is a matter of drastic measures that must be adopted to curb this excess of corruption in Africa. Now, again, When Obasanjo agreed that $300 billion had been stolen from Nigeria, Nigeria is only 50-something years old, after the independence, from the time of independence. And then you talk about $300 billion that had been stolen from the country. Where is this money? Who stole it? If that money was actually put into the economy of Nigeria, what position would Nigeria be at this point in time? So these are the questions that must come to our mind. And even as we speak right now, there's massive, aggressive stealing by leaders in Nigeria, and nothing is done about it. Several leaders have been arrested, and their case is just wasted away with the EFCC and the judiciary. So it is a shame, and it is a very, very, in fact, I don't even know how to explain it anymore. The level of impunity and lawlessness in Africa must call for an attention. It's an embarrassment to every black race across the world, especially Nigeria. You see, every black person looks onto Nigeria as the giant of Africa. The most educated Africans, compared to the rest of Africa. And they look at Nigeria as a country that would spearhead, the progress of the black race. I'll give you an example. Recently, there's a study that just came out. Nigeria is the second largest, has the largest HIV cases in Africa. Can you just imagine? Can you imagine the level of human degradation that the government of Nigeria has plunged the nation? And all of these vices is just byproduct of corruption. Because where there's poverty, people become desperate. And of course, where are these diseases? How are these diseases afflicting Nigerians? You see, when there's corruption, you give room for enemies to intrude into your house. And the rest is history. So, and to my understanding, 420 cases of tuberculosis are reported on a daily basis. So Nigeria, the politicians are not only dehumanizing Nigerians, they are not only stealing their commonwealth, they have also plunged them in a situation where they are vulnerable to diseases, all kind of diseases, and insecurities, killing by herdsmen, Boko Haram, criminals, ritualists and all kind of things. And then now they are being ravished by diseases. And all of these things are vices of corruption. So there has to be a drastic measure to deal with corruption in Nigeria. And then in fact, the rest part of Africa can learn from Nigeria. Let me tell you something. There has to be a way to, when you have a problem, there has to be a way to solve that problem. If you don't adopt a way to solve your problem, let's take, for instance, everybody has been talking about solving corruption problem. This leader will come, they will talk about solving corruption problem. Obasanjo was there, he was talking about corruption. This man there again, he was talking. The other one was talking, and nothing is being done. Nothing. It's like we are simply just making mockery of ourselves. We talk about solving corruption, and corruption is dealing with the nation. In fact, the nation is becoming more and more plundered. And so there has to be a measure to be implemented to deal with this problem. And look at the rest of other nations. Recently, I read on the news that if a high-level political figure in China was involved in a bribe of more than $26 million, you know what happened to him? You can go to Google and just Google him. His name is Sun Zhenkai. Sun, S-U-N, Zhenkai. Now, this man was a rising political figure in China. And so he was involved in this bribery scandal. He was arrested, tried, and eventually he was sentenced to life imprisonment. All his properties were taken from him, seized from him, and he was banned for any political participation in life. And so that is a measure. It's a measure that at least one will understand, that at least a step that China has adopted to curb whatever corruption and all that is happening there. So we must learn from progressive nations that are making progress. And then look at what happened in Israel. Some years ago, a minister was arrested. He was already out of the office as a minister. And so he was tried because he was involved, while he was a minister there, he was involved in some kind of corruption. And then after his term, he was arrested, tried, and sentenced to some years of imprisonment. And so, here in the United States, there have been cases of public officials that have gone to jail because of, corruption. And this corruption we are talking about they're not to be compared to the magnitude of Nigeria type of corruption. In Nigeria, we have politicians that will steal $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion. In fact, recently, I watched the video of John Kerry, the former Secretary of State under Obama. And while he was making his speech on the World Economic Forum in 2016, he said that 50 Nigerians, just 50 Nigerians, had stolen $9 billion. And those 50 Nigerians were public officials. And that you could see John Kerry expressing his frustration on the level of corruption in Nigeria. Can you imagine? Just 50 Nigerians stole $9 billion. I think we Nigerians are making mockery of ourselves. Something needs to be done in that country, or else that country will be dead, if it's not already dead. Something needs to happen in Nigeria. Because right now, the leaders are simply just making mockery of Nigerians, and we are making mockery of ourselves. Can you imagine? 50 Nigerians stole 9. We are not. How many politicians do we have? So this is exactly what I'm talking about. Now, again, I want somebody who is listening to me tonight, if you're a Nigerian, do we have the rule of law in Nigeria? How many politicians have been arrested and tried and sentenced to jail in Nigeria? And we know these people. We know them very well. We know that these are the leaders that have crippled our economy, that have stolen our money. We know them very well. In fact, evidence is there, has been established to prove that these people were involved in public embezzlement, and yet they still, they are just as free as you and I, without any problem. They just, in fact, some of them, as we are speaking right now, are still holding public offices. In 2014, in 1999, when Obasanjo came into office as president, there was a case of Halliburton contract in Nigeria. And it started with Abacha. So when Obasanjo came in, as a matter of fact, that was when the whole thing actually came into light. And so there was an indictment in U.S. because investigation was done, and they found out that some kind of bribery was done in Nigeria, right? And Obasanjo himself was involved. And that bribery was actually done by the CEO of KBR. KBR is a subsidiary of Halliburton Corporations. And what did this man do? His name is Jack Stanley. He is the CEO of KBR. Now, he came to Nigeria, and according to investigations, he spent $180 million to bribe Nigerian officials. And so when he came back to the United States, just to, for whatever, I think it has to do with Halliburton and all of that. And so he came to the United States, and there was investigation. It was whatever reasons, he was busted. So he came back to U.S., and he was placed under investigation. And after that, he was apprehended, he was arrested, and then he was tried. Do you know that the CEO, Jack Stanley himself, was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment by the justice system in America for the bribe that he conducted in Nigeria? And not only that, he was asked to pay $500 million as penalty. And when the man was giving testimonies, he gave a testimony that Obasanjo himself, who was the president of Nigeria at that time, was involved. And what happens to Obasanjo? The same Obasanjo is still carrying his agbada and throwing it here and there and forming one kind of useless organization talking about ruling Nigeria. You see, this is why Nigeria is not making progress. We have darkness in that country. Darkness is beclouded Nigeria because the kind of the elements that are within the hem of affairs, they are enemies of the nation. See, people like all these politicians who were involved, how many Nigerian politicians were tried? How many of them were apprehended? So we are making mockery of ourselves. We have more Nigerians in different parts of the world than any other African country. Is that not a shame? Nigerians are constantly running away from Nigeria because the leaders have destroyed the country. If you go to Nigeria now, there's no... This insecurity is... Nigeria has the highest level of insecurity in Africa. You have Boko Haram, you have the herdsmen, you have armed robbers. The road is terrible. You are traveling on the road, accident every here and there. And there's no safety to life in Nigeria. Why? Because of corruption. Corruption, this is not a time for Nigerians to be dwelling on ethnic and religious differences. This is the problem that is crippling the life of every Nigerian, whether you come from the north, the west, or the east, or the Midwest. I'm from Edo State. We are all involved in this mess that is being created by Nigerian leaders. These Nigerians need to rise up and find a way to curb the excesses of this corruption. Now, my suggestion is this. The reason I analyzed all of this is because we need to first understand that there's a problem. And so, now how do we solve this problem? The only way to solve this problem, because we have seen that even Buhari that just came in, who was running his mouth about 2 years ago, talking about solving corruption problem and all that, it's just a waste of time. Buhari is completely powerless. As a matter of fact, Buhari is not even there. His shadow is right there. So there has to be a way to solve the corruption in Nigeria. And my recommendation is death penalty. Death penalty. Anyone that is involved in the looting of public funds must be tied to the state. Public execution. Public execution. This is not, you see, we have to deal with our problems the way that is commensurate with the crime. Now, the way it is, the level at which Nigerian leaders steal is not just to throw them in jail. It has to, especially when you take this money and take it to another man's land and put the money in the bank there has to be public execution. And such individuals must be banned from public offices for life. The families must be included. I am saying this because this is the only way that the Nigeria is going to make progress. You can come up with all kind of, you can do restructuring, you can even divide yourselves, you can into 10 or 20 countries, the problem will still remain. Look at Southern Sudan and look at North Sudan. North Sudan is doing well, very well. They don't have oil. Southern Sudan has a lot of oil, but look at what is going on there. There has to be a way to solve the problem of corruption in Nigeria, because the situation in Nigeria has become a mockery to Nigerians. It's terrible. That is why the rest part of Africa, they are very angry with Nigerians, because there's no reason, absolutely no reason, why Nigerians should be leaving their country and going to different countries in Africa. The most remote country in Africa, you will see a Nigerian there. What are you doing here? Is try to make a living. Why? What happens to your country? Because the leaders have messed up the country. The same song we have been singing from independence. And this one is corrupt. And this one is corrupt. And we are going to do it like this. And this is the solution. And I will provide this. It's still the same song we are singing today. The only person that has made that was going to make a difference was Idi Agbon and Buhari. Because even right now, I'm beginning to think that Idi Agbon was actually the wheel that was propelling Buhari's government at that time. Because Buhari is completely powerless now. So that was the man that was actually making a change in Nigeria. And Murtala Mohammed. So those two, since independence. So now there has to be a solution. And the only solution is, I'm recommending that tonight. That is the purpose for this discussion. My recommendation is that there has to be an implementation of law or decree to deal with corruption in Nigeria. And I recommend a death penalty, public execution. If the judiciary, if the parliament is not able to make a law to this effect, it means they are just simply, in fact, it's just a waste. As a matter of fact, the parliament has been a waste since 1999. How many laws have been implemented in the interest of Nigerians? And with all the hundreds of millions they are making, the ordinary Nigerian parliamentarian makes more than U.S. president as salaries. U.S. is the richest country in the world. And Nigeria, that has almost the lowest standard of living, on their citizens, make much more money. Ordinary senators make much more money than U.S. president. In fact, I just cannot understand. This is something that all Nigerians must have to wake up. Remove religion, remove ethnic group, remove all these things. Because at the end of the day, it is the Nigerians themselves, whether you are Muslim, whether you are Christians, whether you are Igbos, Yorubas, Hausas, it is the ordinary Nigerians that are taking the brunt of this problem, that are taking the heavy weight of this problem that the politicians have laid on the general populace. It is the ordinary Nigerians. And so there has to be a solution. If Buhari cannot solve this problem, my other program, I recommend him to resign from his office. And he must not come back to contest. Because the problem in Nigeria is an emergency. We need somebody that can solve it. Thank you very much.
Yes, I definitely agree with my dad. Of course, there's really not much more for me to say, except for the fact that, like I said before, there has to be a new system in place. As of right now, the current system is basically messed up. It's not going to work anymore. If we want to make a change, we have to completely rewrite things and change things completely for the better. And as of right now, things that you probably wouldn't expect to even be the case will actually be what will change Africa as of right now. Specifically, like my dad said, Nigeria. So whatever the case may be, I definitely agree with all of my dad's points. And that's basically all that, we have tonight to talk about.
Well, thank you very much, my son. I think in conclusion, I just want to say one more time that Nigerians must be resolute to solve this problem. We need to put aside all our differences. The Muslims, the Christians, all the three major tribes have to work collectively together to put an end to this problem. We must not politicize our destiny, because this is the destiny of Nigeria we are talking about here. We are talking about this generation and the generation yet unborn. From the way things are going, it does not augur well for the nation of Nigeria. I am telling you, because we have probably more than 7 million Nigerians in different parts of the world. And most professionals we have in different parts of the world are Nigerians. And so, and more Nigerians are still living. I looked at the hospital system in Nigeria and all of that. It is pathetic. All these public officials, once they have headache, they take a flight and go to... So it just simply means that the government cannot even build... It's sad. The government of Nigeria cannot even build a hospital well furnished enough for them to treat themselves. They go to Indians, they go to Spain, they go to different countries to take treatment for headache. I remember in the 70s, if you are a Nigerian that was grown, if you are a Nigerian that was grown in the 70s, you will agree with me that there were a lot of Indians in Nigeria in those days. You see them as headmasters in primary schools. You see them as lecturers in high schools and all that. Indians flooded Nigeria because at that time, Nigeria was not even close to as bad as it is. Because colonial masters had just handed over. And then the first politicians who were there, the leaders who were there, of course, were not as greedy as the generation we have today. So Indians were flooding Nigeria. They flooded Nigeria. But look at what is going on today. Indian is now almost part of world power. In fact, any major decision that is being made, Indians' attention is needed. And in fact, Nigerian leaders go to India to take treatment. It is a disgrace. What are we doing? Are we really human beings? Why can't we sit down and use our brain? All the education we acquire in Nigeria, is it useless? I just cannot understand. When the soldiers were there, we say, oh, the soldiers don't know anything. They are just, illiterate. Okay, fine. But the politicians came. In fact, they got worse. So this is our problem. We need to be realistic to ourselves. And so I still want to re-emphasize tonight, what we must do to solve the problem in Nigeria is death penalty. Anything short of that, we are just making mockery of ourselves. And so on this note, I want to say thank you for taking your time to listen to this program, and I encourage you to continue to tune in. We're going to be coming up with more interesting programs. Please subscribe to our channel. You will be seeing more programs, and thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.